Hello, everyone. We are happy to be here to talk about public safety, mental health, helping those who help others. Today, I am going to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Laura Setter. She is the Public Safety Program Coordinator at the League of Minnesota Cities and has been serving in this role for several years. Before that, she was in law enforcement at the city of Minnetonka, a suburb of the Twin Cities, for approximately 20 years, and she also served in several other roles that were essentially related to law enforcement and training, as well as in this area of mental health. My name is Jana Sullivan, and I'm an attorney at the League of Minnesota Cities. My primary practice area is employment law, and I have the great honor of splitting my time between litigation and loss control. And I've had a lot of situations involving mental health and public safety, especially in the last few years. And hopefully we can share some of that insight as we go on today. So today we're going to talk about public safety and PTSD, and we're going to talk a little bit about where we are, where we came from, and where we'd like to go in the future in Minnesota. By way of a little bit of a preview of Minnesota, just because this area of the law is so state specific, we thought we'd highlight a few things about Minnesota that make it unique. The first is that PTSD has been a covered workers' compensation claim in Minnesota since 2013. What that means is that if someone has a diagnosis of PTSD on its own, that is going to be compensable, whereas in the past it had to be accompanied by a physical injury. That is still the case for other mental health injuries currently, that they also have to be accompanied by a physical injury to be compensated. Also, something that's unique about Minnesota is since 2019, there is a presumption that if an employee works in the area of public safety, so police, fire, and paramedics, and they have PTSD, the presumption is that that is work related. And that's something that has really changed the landscape in Minnesota. Specifically, shortly after PTSD was put into law to be a covered claim, we had about 60 claims. Of those individuals, those were individuals who claimed PTSD and claimed a duty-related disability. The large majority of those did not go back to work, but they exited the workplace. And then since that time, we have seen a dramatic increase given the presumption, as well as some other law enforcement events that we're all very well aware of. In 2022, we saw 380 claims for PTSD and a duty-related disability. And again, the vast majority of these individuals are leaving the police force or the public safety field altogether. They're not coming back to work. And this number does not include those individuals who are leaving because of PTSD in Minneapolis and St. Paul, which add in Minnesota another couple hundred individuals leaving service in these areas. One thing that we want to emphasize, given this little bit of background, is where we are today and how we got here. And that's this overall message and mission that it's treatable. So let's talk a little bit about how we got to this point and how we built that data and how we dug into the data. First of all, when we were first gathering information, we had an idea of what kind of claims we were dealing with, the number, where they were coming from, what sector specifically they were coming from PTSD, but we didn't have a lot of other data other than anecdotal type data. So what we wanted to do was to reach out to our city members, and we did that in a couple different ways in both informal and formal surveys and studies. We reached out to cities in general. We also reached out through the Minnesota Chiefs of Police to reach our law enforcement and other public safety employees. We also reached out and did a joint survey with the National League of Cities. And what we found and what I previewed earlier is that many of the areas of the law surrounding PTSD, especially as it plays into work comp or other benefits program, it is very state specific. So in many ways, that national survey didn't necessarily shed light on some of the specifics and details of Minnesota, but it still was incredibly important because it highlighted some similarities that we're going to get to in just a moment. We also dug into the data about how are these PTSD claims coming to us? Is it a single event? Is it a multiple events? And what we found is that about 25% were coming from a single incident, about 25% were coming from a cumulative effect of multiple incidents, and about 50% were unknown. What does that data mean and how does that help us going forward? It means that there may be a real opportunity to kind of stop that cycle or that buildup of PTSD and mental health symptoms when we have that cumulative effect. So it really helped us going forward. The other big takeaway that we have when we dug into this data are these two numbers that you see on your screen, 42 and 13. And these are really important because they not only speak to what's happening in Minnesota, they also speak to what's happening across the nation, as we learned from that survey that we were doing with the National League of Cities. And what we learned is that 42 was the average age of the individual who was claiming PTSD in public safety and often leaving the career or that profession during that time. Also, 13 was very important, and that correlates to that number of 42 because it was the average number of years of service that we were seeing for individuals who were claiming or filing a PTSD claim. Because we are hitting people, or PTSD is hitting people, and people are experiencing that at the age of 42, and when they have about 13 years of experience, basically when they're at the height of their career, especially in law enforcement, which has a little bit of an earlier retirement age, and it's often at the time when individuals are maybe in their first line supervisory position, maybe even advanced since then, but they're definitely offering that critical mentoring to the next and new generation of law enforcement. So we're losing them both as supervisors and experienced officers, as well as mentors for that next generation, which is sort of a double 1-2 punch for police departments confronting this issue. We also want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are now, which is really emphasizing it's treatable and really focusing on the legislative piece, which is especially important given the structure of the law in Minnesota. Really, this is a three-pronged plan of attack and power in a plan, and it relies on collaboration, education, and advocacy. And these three things are very much intertwined. So collaboration, again, Laura's going to talk about that in detail, but it's really reaching out to our stakeholders, both digging deep in a city structure, whether that's elected officials or the people on the ground dealing with this issue, the police departments, police chiefs, that sort of thing, or reaching broad and reaching out to our other agencies, whether that's counties or the state. Education, again, is really reaching out in many different ways and shapes and forms. There is about a $1 billion gap in the pension fund for police and fire in Minnesota, caused in large part because of the individuals who are seeking those benefits because of PTSD. That's going to require some sort of contribution or increase in the future, and that's something that we're also focusing on, educating others, including our members, about. And then advocacy is definitely a big part of the puzzle here also, and that really is speaking to trying to advocate for changes in the legislature and with the laws and rules that apply in this area.
Thanks, Jana. Gosh, you're a tough act to follow, my friend, but I will do my best here. One of the first things we did at the League was rev up our resources for our members. And the League has always provided great resources to their members. We've always done that. But because of the human and financial costs of PTSD, it created urgency for enhancing our education efforts and giving our members as much information as possible. And as my friend Jana likes to say, my position at the LMCIT was probably the beginning of our revving up, because my full-time work is public safety mental health initiatives, specifically PTSD. So one of the first things we did after creating my position was create a position statement saying what we at the LMCIT believed about public safety mental health PTSD. And I just want to take a minute to say that this is in concert with AGRIP's overall risk management philosophy of a pool sharing goals and priorities with their members, staff, and providers. And as you think about risk management for law enforcement mental health, we encourage you to look at AGRIP's best practices related to risk management. So 3 of the things that I would like to highlight from our position statement was, first, the post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental condition caused by experiencing trauma. Because of the nature of the job duties of public safety personnel, they're at more risk for it. It can't be solved by the workers' compensation system alone. And as Jana has spoken about, we need to collaborate with other stakeholders to find solutions, specifically public safety leaders. So we sent a letter And we sent a letter out to our public safety leaders explaining that the costs associated with PTSD claims, both the human and the financial. And we asked them to make prevention and treatment a top priority. We asked them to work with their human resource teams and other city leadership to develop and fund prevention, response, and return to work strategies. We're getting ready to send another letter to top appointed leaders and public safety leaders, asking them once again to create public safety wellness programs. And we're providing them an action plan that actually walks you through step by step how to create a public safety wellness program. And we have learned through research that we have done with our Minnesota members that organizations that have well-established wellness programs reduce both liability and workers' compensation claims. So we know that wellness programs work. In both letters that we sent out, once again, we also included the link to our public safety mental health toolkit that Jana has already mentioned. That toolkit was created with the help of a psychologist, and it includes topics such as it's treatable, peer support, what is wellness, warning signs, and the human resource considerations when dealing with a PTSD situation or claim. And once again, our goal was to provide enough information, but not to overwhelm. We are in the process of working with that same psychologist who will be going through our toolkit, updating the information, adding to it, and taking out pieces that might not work anymore. Our other educational efforts included inviting national law enforcement speakers to present about their own struggles in recovery from PTSD, publishing magazine and blog articles about public safety mental health, using our spring and fall loss control workshops to train on public safety mental health strategies and programs, including a police wellness course in our patrol online training, hosting webinars related to public safety mental health, creating pocket wellness guides for both police and fire service people, and once again, creating a wellness program guide that cities can use. We know that our that wellness programs work and can help reduce work comp claims and liability claims. We're not so sure about all our other efforts and what results we're getting from them, but going forward, we're going to be doing more measurement of those types of programs. And I have to share this with you. I was talking to a police lieutenant, and I was bemoaning to him because sometimes I like to bemoan. And I said to him, I said, you know, sometimes this public safety mental health work feels like we're trying to turn a ship in a bathtub, because this is new to public safety to talk about their own mental health, right? And so I feel like, you know, it's been really kind of sometimes a very challenging journey. And he said to me, he said, Laura, know this, the ship is turning because of the work that the league is doing. You're keeping this in front of us. You're keeping this at the forefront of our attention, and that's important. So it is moving. So that made me feel, it gave me energy to continue moving forward with this work. So as Jana also said, we needed to engage stakeholders. We can't do this alone. And so as I already mentioned, we knew that we needed help from stakeholders and to bring remedy to the human and financial costs of PTSD. So 3 stakeholder groups that I do want to mention to you are, we brought a group of public safety labor groups, public safety management groups, city groups, county groups together for the public safety duty disability stakeholder group to find legislative solution. As Jana said, last year we didn't get a lot of movement. This year we're back at the legislature with new energy and with our fingers crossed that we can get a legislative solution. Because something that I should mention to you is here in the state of Minnesota, when an officer files a PTSD claim, they can go over to our pension, to our public safety pension, PERA, and collect a duty disability pension, and then come back to work comp and get a settlement. And so our systems aren't working well together to get people back to work. So another group that we're partnered with is the Minnesota Public Safety Wellness Initiative. And that is a group of 11 organizations that have come together to bring greater awareness to public safety mental health. And the third group that we've partnered with is the Peer Support Advisory Board, or what they initially started out as the Peer Support Standards and Training Board. They're a stakeholder group that came together as a grassroots effort. They had fire personnel, police personnel, and mental health people that just came together because they wanted to spread the word about peer support across the state. We decided, when I heard about this group, we decided we could get more done if we worked together. So we actually brought them under our umbrella, and they are now the LMCIT Peer Support Standards and Training Board. And because we at the Insurance Trust, we believe that peer support programs are important because they help normalize the conversation about mental illness and public safety. A peer can help provide psychological first aid for an officer that may be struggling. And we also know that they help build resiliency by creating cultures where officers can talk openly about the trauma they experience and how they're feeling. But I think this quote summarizes peer support so well, and I want to read it to you. It says, when we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. And that was by Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. But it's so powerful. And I think that is our tagline for peer support. You are not alone. We are in this together, and we can share this together and talk to each other. So, as my friend Jana also likes to say, Jana says so many good things, but what she likes to say is that public safety mental health is a multi-layered problem, situation, challenge, and it's like peeling an onion. And so we know that PTSD is caused by experiencing trauma, but there are things that create more opportunity to suffer from it, such as not getting enough sleep. And after World War I, the British government did a study looking at officers that came back from the front. And at that time, they called PTSD shell shock. So they looked at people that were coming back with shell shock. And some things that bubbled up out of that study were, first of all, people were spending too long in the trenches with not enough sleep, experiencing trauma. Does that sound familiar? I would argue that we've not learned from that study, that we are still holding people in the trenches too long. They aren't getting enough sleep, and they are experiencing traumas. The difficult part of all this is the public safety culture is really immersed in 12-hour shifts. And the consequences for that, the research shows that the consequences of poor sleep are physical, mental illness, PTSD, performance deficits, and motor vehicle accidents. But unfortunately, these 12-hour shifts morph into 14-hour, 16-hour shifts. And we know that our public safety people are probably sleep deprived. And so we need to bring more attention to this issue.
Thank you very much for that, Laura. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about where we're at now, which is really helping members help themselves. And we think this really speaks to kind of a message across the nation of you have cities with different levels of sophistication, different levels of resources. And what we found is, like with many things, we have to meet cities where they are. So we are exploring lots of creative, innovative new things, in large part because cities are coming to us with these ideas. And some of those are, like other agencies throughout the country, embedding social workers or other professionals within our public safety departments. Some departments are using chaplains or other cross training so that they can have some individuals. We're exploring employee sabbaticals, peer support groups. That is something that has gotten a lot of support in Minnesota, and that Laura specifically has been a cheerleader and really a big pusher of that and influencer of that. We've learned we really got to engage cities at all different levels, that it really needs to start with the police department, the public safety department, the firefighters themselves, including individuals that maybe have suffered from PTSD or other mental health issues. They have a unique perspective that really helps when we're trying to draft solutions in this area. We also need to reach out to our other city leaders, our other public safety leaders. We need to reach out to our elected officials and other individuals that their positions may touch on. Something else we want to emphasize and continue to emphasize as we do this important work is mission possible. And really that is twofold. One, it's emphasizing the mission, the very important mission of public safety, that it is a very mission-driven profession, and that is something that's very important for society. The other part is that we want to emphasize that the mission that we are doing, addressing, treating, and dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues in the workplace is also possible, and that's a mission that is worthy of our commitment and goals.
Thank you, Jana. So tanks versus life rafts. This analogy comes from our police wellness course that was recently written. And I just want to read to you kind of the description of what we mean by this. A tank is tough. It's covered with armor to protect it from hits, but the right rocket at the right angle can destroy it. A rubber life raft is resilient. It's designed to ride the waves, not defeat them. It can take a pounding and then spring back into shape. Toughness can be helpful in some circumstances, but emotional resilience is essential. We need to help public safety people learn to be life rafts and not just tanks. And one way that we are trying to do that in our work is once again by encouraging cities to create wellness programs. And I just took some resiliency training, and the practice of mindfulness is really essential to resiliency and purpose. Keeping the purpose, as Janet talked about that purpose is so important to resilience. And every day reminding people why the work they do is so important. And when you think about it in this regard, teaching cops to be life rafts is also better for the community. Because if you see a tank coming down the road, how much do you want to reach out to that tank, right? But if you see a life raft coming, you want to reach out and grab onto that life raft because you know that that can provide you, help. So I think there's more, it's not just for public safety, obviously, that we want them to be resilient and to be life rafts. It's for the betterment of our communities. So that moves me into compassion and accountability. This is a term that I really appreciate and I like, because we have to hold our public safety people accountable, but we have to do it with compassion. And we have officers now that are involved in discipline actions. They get themselves in some type of trouble, and they're in a discipline situation, they file a PTSD claim. And this practice creates a lot of unhappiness among our police leadership, our city leadership, and others. However, I just want to talk a little bit about that, because when someone is suffering from a mental illness, it oftentimes comes out in their actions. And so the first place you're going to see it is in their behaviors. And so because the way we feel is the way we think is the way we act. So I just want to share a story with you real quickly. I had the opportunity, and actually the great privilege, to work with an officer who actually witnessed her colleague get killed in the line of duty. And she held his hand while he died. And she shared with me that she could hardly get up off the couch after that experience. She was having such difficulty. But she continued to go to work. And she described herself as a shining star, that she was on the fast track to leadership. And she started to get complaints about her performance. And that wasn't like her. So a supervisor pulled her in and said, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And she said, "Nothing, I'm fine." And he said, "No, you're not. You are not fine." And they got her the help that she needed to get better and to become a top performer again. And she is now a corporal for that organization. So it's so very important that police leaders and others understand that maybe, once again, the first time you're going to see someone struggling is by them not acting in a way that is normal for them. That's what we mean by compassionate accountability. holding officers accountable, but intervening early to find out what may be going on. And so they don't think their only way out of a tough situation is by filing a PTSD claim. In March and April, as part of our spring workshop series, we're going to be providing training to public safety people about how to have those courageous conversations. Because police officers are human, just like the rest of us. Ask them how they're feeling, and what are they going to say? I'm fine, right? But we know, because of the nature of their job duties, that they're not always fine, and that they can suffer from mental injuries like PTSD. So we need to help law enforcement, public safety, build cultures of wellness, because we need them to be healthy, and we need them to stay in their professions. Just like Jana said, we are losing too much experience, and we need to keep them healthy and keep them contributing to their communities so we can all benefit.